Today, a moment in history when the BBC got a little cheeky. Hello and welcome to RotD Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 1992 made-for-TV movie Ghostwatch. I typically am not going to be doing made-for-TV movies on this channel. I mean, periodically I will, especially if they are, well, specifically requested by the Rotted Souls out there, or have a cultural relevance as this one does. This was a bit of a phenomenon that most people outside of the UK have never heard of. Certainly outside the circle of horror aficionados might not have ever heard of this. But this was a moment in 1992 when the BBC decided to take inspiration from Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast. They developed this hour-and-a-half long, they wrote it, they directed it, they pre-recorded it, everything all done. And then they presented it, and they presented it as live TV. They had stewards of the broadcasting world, cultural icons that were known and established, people that the audience would trust. Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Mike Smith, Craig Charles. These were all people that were known in the BBC for delivering talk shows and news and so forth, and they got them to play themselves in this pre-recorded segment, presenting itself as live news when in fact it was all staged, and it scared the pants off of a lot of people in the UK, which was just a fantastic moment. In my opinion, I loved that they did this, and they never really tried to present it as fact. They had opening credits where it said written by, but even so, people that tuned in after the opening credits would not have known the difference, and it definitely scared the heck out of them. But what did I think of it watching it after the fact and watching it well after the fact, because I had never seen it prior to just last night. I knew of its existence, I just never sat down and pressed play until last night. So to get into what I felt about it, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot of this one I gave a 21 out of 25. The storyline followed a house that was the biggest example that they could think of as haunted in the UK. They wanted to have a live broadcast where they wanted to try and capture ghost-like phenomenon, and so after examining dozens and dozens of houses and all sorts of reports and so forth, they centered in on this one, which was occupied by a mother and her 2 young daughters. They describe throughout the movie some historical context of this as there was pounding on the walls to alleviate her daughter's concern and worry. She told them that, even though she didn't necessarily believe it herself, that it was just the hot water pipes coming on. So one of the daughters affectionately named the ghost Pipes, and Pipes is a bit mischievous, and things do go wrong during the live broadcast. I thought, honestly, that the framing of the storyline, the framing of the plot, and the haunted house thing was a bit so-so, but the way that they recorded the studio segments, cutting back to the live segments, cutting back to the interviews, and people taking the phone calls, and the people phoning in, and the people at the studio taking the phone calls, and you say you saw this thing that in this frame that we showed here that we missed. Well, let's roll back and look at that. And everything about the way this was scripted in its entirety was phenomenal. Even though the haunted house story itself was a little bit weak, that's not the point. The point is the entirety of the movie, the hour-and-a-half long movie, and that was great. So yeah, I easily give this 21 out of 25 points. Intent is, can be a very tricky category for me, and I think this movie in particular has been difficult because context is key. What they were intending to do was have a live broadcast, or the seemings of a live broadcast, to scare the pants off of people. And in that, they achieved a massive amount of success. But my watching it and my reviewing it and providing some context, if you were interested in watching this is why I don't provide spoilers, is because I'm assuming when people are watching these reviews, whether or not they have seen the movie, I have to operate on the assumption that they haven't. And in that, the context is key. So I'm coming from the point of view of not somebody that watched it live, but somebody that is watching it now, 26 years after the fact. Wow, I'm old. Regardless, so the impact that it had on me, knowing the context of the movie, knowing that it wasn't live, knowing what it was trying to do, and then just watching it flesh out, I think definitely had much, much, much less impact. Overall, this was a great movie. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't terribly scary in the context of me sitting in my living room 26 years afterwards watching it. So I gave it 13 out of 25. I encountered the same thing, but on the opposite end with the Blair Witch Project. I remember going to the theater when that first came out. And I was a teenager at the time, and I believed the press and the hype and the limited release stuff that they were coming out with, that this was a real story. I watched the Blair Witch Project. The first time I saw it was in the mental context of believing that this was real, that they actually found this footage, edited it, and released it, from some tapes out in the woods somewhere. And in that context, it scared the crap out of me. It was such an impactful movie. I left the theater bone chilled. And I think that people watching it now, they're going to have much less impact than I had at that moment. So context is key, and the intent category gets tricky in that moment. 13 out of 25. Acting, I gave a 20 out of 25. Great acting all around. If we're talking the BBC broadcasters, they are simply doing what they do every day and doing it well. So it's easy to say that they did a fantastic job with their performances there. But digging further in the story, underneath the story with the haunted house and the two little girls, I thought those two little girls did a great job as actresses themselves, playing this role, playing this storyline, especially as the broadcast continued and developed. There were some red herrings thrown in there that I thought that worked really well, and it was largely because of their performances that worked well. So just great all around. Technical, 24 out of 25. This was fantastic on a technical level. It doesn't show too much. This is a very slow burner movie, and it was done in such a way that apparently the Ghost of Pipes is shown throughout. In little snippets and ways, very, very subtle. I think, if I recall correctly, looking at trivia, I think that viewers have found 8 instances where he was there in the background or in a flash. And the BBC has said that, well, that's not even all of them. I think that there were 13 in total that they actually included within the broadcast itself. So just the way that they were able to present the information without spoon feeding it, the way that they were able to frame everything. This was this wasn't found footage, but this was so unique in its presentation, and nothing in the world of horror had been done like this before. The closest I can really think of is the Orson Welles War of the Worlds broadcast, but that was a radio play. So I can't really speak to it as far as the visual art that is cinema. So they really, really just nailed it and pulled it off, I think, in every way possible. The fact that they got established broadcasters, the fact that it looked like a studio space, a real good studio space, that they were trying this new show out called Ghostwatch that will be broadcasting once a year, and let's see how it goes, and it doesn't go well. Everything about it worked. So handily, 24 out of 25. Gives us a total of 78 out of 100 points. This I would heartily recommend. If for no other reason than as the cultural bookmark that it is. If you want to get into horror and you want to have a lot of the cultural bullet points nailed down across the world of, when it's not just the next slasher movie, but when the world of horror got turned on its head and reached a new era, this is absolutely a great mark in the history of horror movies. So I definitely recommend it on that point. Beyond that, it's just a great movie overall. It does have some good scary moments to it. You're not going to get the impact of the live watchers back in 1992. That's just a sad, unfortunate state of affairs, but I think you'll still really like it, and I do recommend it. So that should about do it for 1992's Ghostwatch. I thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.